Finding Faith and Funny, welcome back. Thank you for listening. My name is Chase. I appreciate you listening. If this is your first time listening to an episode, this is a podcast where we explore the relationship between humor and faith and how humor plays a role in our life, whether you're religious or the only thing you have faith in is yourself. Whatever. Humor plays a part in it, and that's really what we try to discuss. Now, if you're listening to this, it's at least Memorial Day, because this episode is slated to come out on Memorial Day 2026 at 5 a.m. So happy Memorial Day to you. Listen, Memorial Day is for remembering things. And I was thinking about my grandpa, who taught me a lot of life lessons. This is my mom's dad. He taught me that you should not wear socks with flip-flops. Not because he sat me down and taught me that, but I know it didn't look right on him when he would wear it. So there's a lesson he taught me. He also taught me how to, shoot a gun when I was 5. And he also taught me what the N-word was when he yelled it at a referee at a basketball game of mine when I was 8. So, lots of life lessons. He also taught me and my cousin something really weird that I didn't really understand. And to this day, I don't know if I fully do, that he always said, whenever a bird hits a window, someone's going to die. Now, if you want me to elaborate more on the meaning behind that, I'm not going to. I was just thinking of my grandpa and the quirky lessons he taught me and how different he was from my dad's dad. You see, my dad's dad is the type of guy who would sit on the couch on a Saturday afternoon and read the Quran in French just because it was something interesting. Which personality do you think I got? I'll give you a hint. It's kind of a mixture of both of them. Not that I'm going to read the Quran in French, but I look exactly like my father's dad, my dad's dad, and I have some of the weird habits from my mom's dad. Not that I use the N-word or wear socks with flip-flops, but I don't know. It's somewhere in the middle. We'll get back to part of that in a little bit. I promise this will all tie back around together. So listen. I started doing stand-up comedy. The first time I ever touched a microphone doing stand-up was in June of 2013, and it went really bad. I signed up to do 3 minutes. I got off the stage in less than 90 seconds because it was just so bad, and I thought, well, I don't know how people do this. Apparently, it's not something I could do. About 9 months later, I decided I wanted to try again. And this time it went really well. I was on stage for about 2.5 minutes, got about 7 laughs. And I was like, oh my gosh, I did it. That was so hard and so scary. And I went back a couple weeks later and did it again, about 2 minutes, and got even more laughs, was getting more comfortable. And then I went again and I bombed really bad. And I thought, well, at least I did it, twice successfully. I'm good. And then I went to see a comedian, and his opener was on stage for 10 minutes, and that felt like forever to me. And then the headliner did 90 minutes, and that felt like forever to me. When you watch a comedy special, they're typically anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour long. And I remember thinking, after even just 2 times doing 2 minutes successfully, looking at someone doing 10 minutes as an opening spot, for a person who's doing 90 minutes, I look at both the opener doing just 10 minutes and the headliner and think, how does someone do that? I could never get on stage for that long. I could never do this for 10 minutes. How do they do that? Because I could never. 10 minutes, let alone an hour or an hour and a half. And then I think about it, and that's kind of been a common thought for me my whole life, as I'm sure it is with everyone. Everyone knows someone or sees something in their life where they look at someone and they think, man, how does that person do that? Because I could never do it. I think back going to the 5-day scout camps back when scouts were a thing that weren't getting sued out of existence. And, you leave on a scout camp on Monday, you go to the camp, you do your merit badges, you come home Saturday. 5 nights. Well, the first 2 times I tried that, I was usually home by Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. I couldn't do it. I'd get homesick. And I would think, man, how do these kids who are my age last the whole week at scout camp? Because I could never do it. Well, until the 3rd time I tried, And I did it. And I was able to kind of conquer that. And that was a huge step for me. And then when I got a little bit older, when I was 15, I went on this thing called Pioneer Trek. Now in the Mormon church, especially in Utah, we honor the pioneers, our ancestors who walked across pretty much the country in covered wagons trying to look for freedom until they landed in Utah. And so we had this thing for 3 days where we dressed up like pioneers and we went and pulled wagons in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming on the same trail they did. And just kind of, it's like a Renaissance festival without the alcohol and cleavage. And so we did that for 3 days and it was hard. Now, I'll also tell you that 2 days before I left on that Pioneer Trek, I was in Hawaii. I was in Hawaii actually for about 5 weeks before I left on that trek. I was in a tropical paradise, jumping off cliffs into the ocean, eating sherbet out of a pineapple, and then I got home, jet-lagged, got on a Greyhound bus dressed like a pioneer, went to the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, and pulled a handcart for 3 days. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know how hard it was for the pioneers to do what they did, but I will tell you this. Had they been to Hawaii 2 days before they left on their journey, I'll bet it would have been a little bit harder. The point is, on the way home from that Pioneer Trek, after 3 days and getting just a sliver of insight of what the pioneers went through, I started thinking about the pioneers actually taking 3-month journey while being hunted and persecuted, walking in the snow, losing family members, doing all those things. And I thought, how in the world did they do that? Because I could never. Let's fast forward again to when I was 19 and was supposed to go serve a 2-year Mormon mission. Remember, I'm the kid who went home from a scout camp, a 5-day scout camp, 2 years in a row early because I was homesick. And here I was supposed to go serve a 2-year Mormon mission where you leave home for 2 years. You don't watch TV, you don't date, you don't socialize. Your day is you wake up, you work out, you get dressed, you study, you go outside, and you preach the gospel till 9 p.m., and then you come home, you plan your next day, you go to bed at 10:30, and you do it again the next day. That's your life for 2 years. And I remember thinking the night before, I thought about all these people I knew who had already served their missions or were serving their mission. I'm thinking, how are they doing this so easily? Because I'm supposed to do this, and I don't know if I can. And you know what? There was moments where I wanted to be done, especially in those first 3 weeks. And after a while, everything was just routine. And I remember the night before I finished my 2-year mission, I remember sitting there looking up at the ceiling thinking I was going home the next day going, I can't believe I did this because I didn't think I ever could. I am 99% sure the people in my ward, in my neighborhood, in my church who knew I was kind of a homesick kid were placing bets on how long I would actually last on a 2-year mission. But the point is that same mindset of, I don't know how someone does this because I could never do it, goes with me and probably goes with a lot of us. And we don't know what we're capable of until we have to do it. Now, prior to my 2-year mission, I remember in 2003, it was announced that the classic rock band Styx was going to be on tour and they were going to be coming through Salt Lake City where I was growing up. And my sister surprised me and got me tickets to go see Styx. And Styx had always been a favorite band of mine. And if I'm being honest, they still are. I love Styx because they're kind of the perfect band for a guy like me, like a guy who peaked emotionally while in a Toyota Corolla, you know? I don't even listen to Styx like a normal person. Most people hear Come Sail Away and they think, what a classic rock masterpiece. And I hear it and I think, this would absolutely slap while crying in a grocery store parking lot. That song starts out all nice and soft and kind of emotional. And, you know, it's like, I'm sailing away. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Me too. I'm sailing away right out of healthy coping mechanisms. Look, Styx fans, we're a very specific type of human. We're not cool enough to be Led Zeppelin. We're not dangerous enough to be Metallica. We're just emotionally confusing people that own at least one hoodie from Kohl's. Like, if you look at it, Styx really on paper is like the official band of divorced dads with reward points and uncles who say, now that's music. I'm that uncle, by the way. And they're also kind of the perfect band for men who accidentally get too deep during a casual drive. Like, have you ever noticed a Styx song is incredibly dramatic and every song sounds like a theater kid got stranded out in the ocean? Remember the song Mr. Roboto? What happened? Why are you yelling that song? It sounds like a panic attack in shoulder pads. Like, I love that the band commits to every song 1000% with no irony. They don't hold back and they sing like the rent was due at a medieval times. Because honestly, look, Styx makes sense for me emotionally because my childhood trauma loves a keyboard solo and I don't know why. And so I was really excited to Styx because their songs have kind of the same energy as kind of how I felt growing up. And for whatever reason, God looked at me and said, you know what this emotionally codependent future stand-up comedian needs? A synth-heavy yacht rock adjacent panic music. And let's be honest, he nailed it. So they were coming to Salt Lake in 2003, May 28th, 2003. And if you've heard me on other podcasts or if you've listened to previous episodes, you might know what's coming. I went to the concert with my cousin. It was fantastic. The opening bands was REO Speedwagon, Styx was in the middle, and then Journey was headlining. And me and my cousin were on our way to the concert. Okay? And on the concert, we're driving, and a bird flew into our windshield, and we're like, oh, that was crazy. And then we left the concert. We left a little bit early, and I'll get into reasons why, maybe on a different episode, of why we felt to leave early. Now, remember, 2003, I'm 16. I don't have a cell phone. My cousin doesn't have a cell phone. We're there to enjoy the moment, right? We get back to my cousin's house, and I had this urgent message to call my dad. My dad was up at the hospital where my mom had been for 6 months. She'd been battling stuff, and I knew she was sick, but I thought my dad was having me call him because he figured out that I skipped a class I was failing that day. And I thought, well, I don't want to lecture right now in front of my cousins. Just tell him I'll call him when I get home. And they said, no, you needs to call him now. And I thought, shoot, he is pissed. It's 11:30 at night and he needs to call me to call him now. So I called him, took their phone, and I kind of walked into their kitchen, and not realizing that my cousins all went down the hallway because they knew that my dad was about to tell me that my mom passed away about 15 minutes before I called him. It's not anything that in hindsight should have surprised me given my mom's condition, but I don't know if you can ever be prepared to hear that sentence. Chase, your mom passed away tonight. And I fell on the floor, and my one cousin Lita came running in to make sure I was okay. She just held me there while I was talking to my dad about everything. And I remember thinking, I don't want to be one of those kids who turns weird after their parents died. One of my really good friends, Chase Clark, his dad died about a month before my mom did. And I remember I didn't know how to talk to him anymore because I was scared of emotions. I didn't want to trigger anything, but I also wanted to be there for him as a friend. And it was just kind of this weird place. But I remember watching him come back to school, and he was still my friend. He really hadn't changed. And I remember thinking, how is he living his life now that his dad died? Because I couldn't do that. And now here I was crying on a kitchen floor, wondering, I can't believe my mom just died. I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can live or move on. I don't know how to move on from this. And I think a lot of people feel that when you lose a loved one, either to death or maybe a relationship ends or whatever it is, you look at the situation from the outside and you think, I don't know if I can laugh again. Or maybe I don't know if I'm going to have faith again. Whatever it is, when you go through those moments, when you get that information that someone you love and are close to is gone, it's almost like time travel, because now the world is permanently different than the world you knew before. So my question now is, why is it so important that we learn how to laugh again when we go through something like that? Because listen, losing someone you love changes the way you hear silence, and that is one of the weirdest parts of grief. Before somebody dies, silence just feels quiet. Afterwards, silence can feel loud, it can feel heavy. You sit in a room and suddenly every memory shows up at once like an uninvited relative after a funeral potato casserole. I don't think that's why humor matters so much after loss. Or I should say, I think that's why humor does matter so much after loss. Not because laughter is going to erase the pain. It doesn't do that. But humor just reminds us that we're all still alive while we're going through these dark times. When my mom died, I remember people acting like if you laughed too soon, it meant you didn't care enough, like grief has some sort of rules or wait list. Okay, everybody, absolutely no smiling again until Labor Day. But families don't really work that way, especially my family. Families that use humor before the loss happened, they're going to use it after it happened. My mom, I mentioned this on my episode with Priscilla, there were more stories told that caused laughter at my mom's funeral than there were cries. And everyone was devastated, don't get me wrong. But because of the way my mom lived her life, the best thing we could do was to laugh, because my mom loved laughter more so than any person I've ever seen. And if you think about the people you've lost in your life, how did they live their life? And then answer that question with, now, how do you think they would want you to live your life? Do they want you to be sad the rest of your life because they're gone? Is that the best way to honor them, is to be sad? Or is the best way to honor them to say, hey, I'm taking your memory with me, and we're going to go live this life, and we're going to laugh and have joy with the memories of you. And I think that's how you honor people. Because you can't spend your whole life laughing with people, then suddenly act like laughter dishonors them after they're gone. Honestly, some of the hardest I've ever laughed in my life have been during grieving. And sometimes it's over the dumbest things. Because you can be crying one minute, then your uncle says something insane at the funeral luncheon, and suddenly everybody just loses it laughing near a crock pot. And that's one of the best moments ever, because you laugh yourself to tears because you don't think you should be laughing, which makes it even funnier. Humor during grief is really emotional oxygen, because grief is exhausting. It's physically exhausting. And people don't realize that your brain is trying to process the fact that someone that existed every day of your life and now they don't, that's too big for your brain to hold all that at once. So laughter is going to just give you tiny breaks that will keep you from drowning. You're not going to escape it. You're not getting out of the water. You're just going to have some oxygen for a little bit. Honestly, I think people we love would want that for us. I think my mom wanted us to laugh. I don't think our loved ones would want us sitting in darkness forever going, well, I can never enjoy another sandwich again because grandma died. My mom wanted everyone to stand up at her funeral and do the hokey pokey. I said that on Priscilla's episode, and that's 100% a true story. Humor becomes proof that the relationship still exists in some way. If you know someone who died of starvation, you're not going to just not eat anymore. They're going to want you to eat because they weren't able to. Like, it's just, nobody gathers around and says, remember when Dad properly organized the garage? No. You're going to remember ridiculous, humorous stuff. You're going to remember when your dad backed into the mailbox or accidentally wore 2 different shoes to church or yelled at a printer like someone betrayed it. Humor will keep you human, because grief has a way of turning people into saints after they die. Suddenly, everybody becomes perfect. And that's not real either. The healthiest thing sometimes is laughing and admitting I loved this person deeply, and they were also an absolute disaster sometimes. That's the real love. And honestly, laughter can be spiritual too. Whether you believe laughter comes from God or evolution or survival instinct, it serves a purpose because it reconnects people. If you've ever noticed after a funeral, the first genuine laugh usually changes the entire room. Everybody exhales at the same time. It's like the room collectively remembers, oh yeah, we're still a family and we're still here. And I think that matters. Because after loss, people sometimes feel guilty for moving forward. Like healing means leaving the person behind. Healing is not betrayal. Living your life fully is not disrespectful to a dead person. It's honoring them, especially if they've helped shape who you became. And I think about that a lot with comedy, because there are moments on stage when I'm making strangers laugh and I realize parts of my mom are still here. Her sense of humor, her personality, the way she connected with people, that doesn't disappear and just go away. The grief changes over time. It adapts. And first, it feels like surviving minute to minute. And then eventually you start noticing something strange, that memories that only used to make you cry slowly start to make you laugh too. Not because you stop missing them, but because you finally become bigger than the pain. And you understand it, and the humor helped you get there. And I think that's one of the most beautiful parts about being a human, is that we can carry heartbreak and joy at the same time. That's what humor does. It does not erase grief. It sits beside it. Now, the biggest thing I want you to take away from this whole episode is this. On the way to that concert that night that my mom died, like I said, a bird flew into our windshield. A bird flew into our window and someone died. My grandpa called it. Now listen, my mom was an amazing person, and some of you might have known her. You know she was an amazing, beautiful person, but she was also very unconventional, and any obscure sense of humor I have absolutely came from her. I'm going to tell you a story that maybe 6 people on this planet know. When I was in junior high, my older sister was in high school. She had a boyfriend, and it didn't work out. She broke up with him, and he did not take this well. And it was to the point where at night he'd be sneaking around our house, jumping in our window wells, trying to spy to see what my sister was doing. And we knew about this. And so one night he was doing his thing around the yard, and we went upstairs and we told my mom, and she said, I'll take care of it. And so we were in the upstairs, and down on the main level, he was sneaking around the house, and as quietly as she could, she opened the window and she waited until he got right below the window. And at the quietest moment possible, as she heard him come around, as loudly as she could, she turned around and farted out the window. I am not making this up. It was so loud. Like, the neighbor's dog barked. Do you understand? My mom farted to evade a stalker successfully. We never saw him again. And he can't go tell people he was stalking my sister and that this happened. He's still going to be the weirdo in this whole situation. We looked at my mom like, did you really just do that? She's like, what? You just farted out the window. She said, that wasn't a fart, it was a warning shot. Think about this. This kid is in like the most vulnerable moment of his life, being as quiet as he could. And he gets around to this moment, and all he hears above him is something that I can only describe as a motorcycle trying to start underwater. And of course it scared him because he's a teenage boy and he didn't know girls could do that yet. Thank you for listening to Finding Faith in Funny. Again, I really appreciate it. Whether you listen to every episode or it's just your first one, I appreciate it. And if you're wondering if that's a true story about my mom, I assure you it is 100% true. And that's not even the best story about her. It's just one of the many. The fact that I've had any success in comedy comes from her obscure sense of humor. I have no problem giving her all the credit where the credit is due. So, hopefully you have a happy Memorial Day. Hopefully this episode gave you some good insight, some chuckles, and some stuff to think about. And if you know of someone who might benefit from hearing anything at all that was said on here, send them this episode. And if you don't think you know of anyone who could benefit from anything, send it to someone as a joke. I don't care. Just keep the listenings coming. My downloads, listen, I've tried and failed 5 or 6 different podcasts. This is the only one where the numbers are substantial enough that I love doing it, and I feel like it's reaching certain people. So continue to share it by all means necessary. Maybe by some miracle, if the FBI is listening to all of our conversations, maybe those should count as downloads. I'm just kidding. If you have anything you'd like to share with the podcast, again, as always, faithandfunny@gmail.com. Appreciate you listening. We have some very special guests coming up, some surprise guests that I'm not going to give any clues, but one of them is going to rock the boat a little bit. And I am just so excited. Anyways, talk to you next week. Enjoy.